As I drove toward my childhood home, my palms sweated against the steering wheel. It had been 5 years since I left Montana, and now, at 28, I was returning not as the disappointed daughter they remembered, but as Colonel Natalie Williams. Tucked away in my bag was the insignia of the youngest cyber defense colonel in modern Army history, a secret my family knew nothing about. The sun dipped low over the familiar hills as I pulled into the driveway, heart pounding. I was home, but it didn't feel like it. The same peeling paint, the same wind chime on the porch, the same weight of judgment in the air. "Natalie, you made it," my mother called from the kitchen, not bothering to greet me. Her tone was flat, indifferent, as if I were an old neighbor stopping by, not her daughter after years away. I stepped into the hallway, lined with faded family photos, every frame a reminder of the past they chose to honor: cheerleading trophies, graduation pictures, Gregory's corporate milestones, none of me in uniform. My room upstairs was frozen in time, preserved like a shrine to the version of me they had approved of. The academic star, the business school candidate, not the soldier. As I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers grazing the old quilt, memories flooded back. I remembered the night I told them I'd accepted a military scholarship. My father's voice still echoed in my mind. "The military is for people without options, Natalie. You're smarter than that." I almost backed out, but something inside me held firm. I joined the RODC and never looked back. Over the years, I sent them photos from deployments, links to articles, invitations to ceremonies. None were acknowledged. Meanwhile, my brother Gregory rose through the corporate ranks, following in my father's footsteps at Pinnacle Defense Systems. They called him a prodigy. Me? I was a phase they hoped would pass. I opened my suitcase and removed the garment bag containing my formal Army dress uniform. I unzipped it slowly, revealing polished buttons, decorated ribbons, and the silver eagle insignia that marked my rank colonel. I carefully hung it in the closet, hidden behind high school hoodies and forgotten scarves. They didn't know that the massive contract Pinnacle was about to land with the Department of Defense was under my authority. That tomorrow, at their big company event, I would walk into the room not as Natalie the disappointment, but as the Pentagon liaison with final say on a $1.2 billion deal. Tonight, I would eat dinner with people who still thought I pushed paper at some base. But tomorrow, everything would change, and they would finally see who I really was. The house smelled the same roast beef, overcooked vegetables, and the subtle aroma of tension that had lingered since my teenage years. The dining room was already set when I walked in, the same faded placemats, the same chipped dishes, and the same unspoken hierarchy at the table. My mother moved around the kitchen, humming softly, not bothering to ask me how I was or what I'd been doing all these years. Instead, she spoke eagerly about Gregory's latest promotion. "Senior Project Manager," she beamed, placing a steaming dish of potatoes on the table. "Shannon Murphy herself handpicked him. Isn't that something?" I smiled politely. "That's great. I'll be sure to congratulate him." It was mechanical, like all the practiced replies I'd mastered over the years to keep the peace. When Gregory finally arrived, flanked by his polished wife Megan, the room lit up. "There he is," my father called, his voice proud, booming. I stood to greet them, receiving a quick, distracted hug from Gregory and a strained smile from Megan. My cousin Tiffany came in soon after, confident as always, in a tailored suit and heels that echoed with each step. "Tiffany just closed a multi-million-dollar deal," my mother bragged as she handed her a glass of wine. She's doing amazing at the bank." I greeted her warmly. Unlike the others, Tiffany had always been kind, even if she didn't quite understand my path. Dinner was served and the conversation predictably orbited around Gregory. His upcoming business trip to Seattle, Megan's promotion, Tiffany's new condo. Not once did anyone ask about my career. Not once did anyone wonder what I'd been doing overseas, or how many teams I had led, or what it meant to be responsible for the nation's cyber defense. Instead, my mother asked between bites, "Natalie, are you still at the same rank? What is it now, Captain?" My father chimed in vaguely, "You know, the military's good for structure, but I've always said the real competition is out here in the business world." I stared down at my plate, feeling the old sting of dismissal, but now tempered with the quiet knowledge that I could dismantle the entire table with a single sentence. But I didn't. Not yet. "Something like that," I said softly. I was a full colonel, with command clearance, oversight of the very project my father and brother were obsessing over. But tonight wasn't the time. Tomorrow would speak for itself. Gregory launched into a speech about how Shannon Murphy had entrusted him with leading a new defense interface integration team, a big step, he claimed, in corporate innovation. "She says, I have a fresh perspective that might help get things moving." I held back a smirk. The project he was so proud of, that was mine. My office at the Pentagon had reviewed every blueprint, every protocol. My team had flagged gaps in his team's last submission. He had no idea. The conversation turned to property and stability things my family worshipped. Tiffany's mortgage, Gregory's second car, Megan's firm's stock options. Then my mother, almost theatrically, said, "It's nice to see young people establishing themselves, not just bouncing from place to place every few years." I knew she meant me. I'd moved through 4 states and 2 continents in less than a decade. Duty stations, combat deployments, cyber warfare conferences, none of it mattered to her because it didn't come with granite countertops and local PTA meetings. I stabbed my vegetables, wishing the meal would end. "So," my father finally said, "tomorrow's a big day. Shannon's flying in personally for the review. They're announcing the contract details, too. Some colonel from the Pentagon is supposed to attend." He laughed lightly. "Doubt they'll send anyone high-ranking. Probably some junior rep who'll nod and go back to D.C. My fork paused in mid-air. The irony was too rich. "That'll be interesting," I said calmly. "What kind of contract is it?" Gregory scoffed. "Military types never really get the business side. They're just protocol followers." "Come on, Greg," Tiffany said, clearly uncomfortable. But he was on a roll. "Seriously, it's not like they're innovators. The military just executes what we create." I bit my tongue so hard it nearly bled. You have no idea, I thought. No idea that the systems you're building were spec'd, tested, and revised under my leadership. No idea that tomorrow I'll be the one approving or rejecting your work. No idea that the rank you mocked holds the future of your division in its hands. As dinner wrapped up, my father leaned back in his chair and said, 28 years at Pinnacle. This contract might be what finally pushes me to VP. I nodded, lips pressed together. Tomorrow would change all of that, not to punish them, but to reveal a truth they'd refused to see. I excused myself and went upstairs. In my room, I opened the closet and stared at my uniform, its eagle insignia gleaming under the lamplight. The medals, the citations, the stripes, they weren't just decorations. They were the proof of everything I'd done, while they weren't looking. The doorbell rang downstairs, Gregory's arrival for dessert, no doubt. I didn't join them. I sat on my childhood bed, the one they thought still belonged to a girl who gave up. I wasn't angry. I was done being angry. Tomorrow, I would walk into that company as who I really was, and the only thing louder than the truth would be their silence when they finally saw me. The morning air was crisp as I stepped out of the guest room, my footsteps echoing down the quiet hallway. My parents had already left for the office, unaware that I would soon follow not as their daughter, but as the Pentagon's representative. In the mirror by the stairs, I caught a glimpse of myself, now dressed in my full Army service uniform. The brass buttons gleamed, my colonel insignia firm on each shoulder, and the ribbons lined across my chest told stories my family had never cared to ask about. This wasn't just clothing, it was my record, my identity, and today it would speak louder than anything I could say. I arrived at Pinnacle Defense Systems headquarters 30 minutes early. The glass and steel facade reflected the rising sun, pristine and corporate, just like the lives my family had always idolized. As I entered through the security checkpoint, the guard stood up straighter. "Good morning, Colonel," one said, recognizing the eagle on my collar. I presented my credentials, and he scanned them twice, then blinked. "You're the liaison?" I nodded. "Colonel Natalie Williams, Department of Defense. I'm here for the 0900 briefing." "You're early," he muttered, "and unexpected. That's the point," I said gently. "National security doesn't make appointments." Inside, the building buzzed with nervous energy. Executives straightened ties. Assistants rushed back and forth with coffee. Project leads whispered near whiteboards. No one recognized me yet, and I preferred it that way. I rode the elevator to the executive floor, reviewing my talking points. My authority on Project Aegis wasn't symbolic, it was structural. I held final approval on all cybersecurity specifications, which meant my word was binding. When the elevator doors opened, I walked straight into the heart of their operation. Gregory was the first to see me. He was outside the conference room, flipping through notes, when he glanced up and froze. His mouth opened slightly, confusion spreading across his face. "Natalie?" he asked. "What are you doing here? And why are you in that uniform?" "I'm here for the project review," I answered calmly. Before he could respond, our father appeared around the corner, speaking with another executive. When he caught sight of me, he stopped mid-sentence. "Natalie," he said slowly, "what is this?" "I'll explain shortly," I said. "I believe we're all heading into the same meeting." I walked past them, every step measured, every heartbeat steady. Inside the conference room, name placards were already set up. Mine read, COL, Natalie Williams, DOD Liaison. A few people glanced at it, puzzled. I took my seat quietly, opened my folder, and waited. At 9 Hawk Sharp, Shannon Murphy, Pinnacle's formidable CEO, entered. She was everything I had imagined sharp, poised, in control. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. She paused, then smiled with recognition. "Colonel Williams," she said, crossing the room. "I wasn't expecting you in person." "Thought I'd make the visit," I replied, shaking her hand. "Too important a project to review over a screen." She turned to the room. "Everyone, please welcome Colonel Natalie Williams, our liaison with the Department of Defense. She has full oversight on Project Aegis and will be providing input and approvals moving forward." The effect was immediate. Heads turned, eyes widened, and across the room I watched my father and brother slowly come to grips with what was happening. The meeting began with project updates. One by one, department heads presented their slides, timelines, budgets, system architecture. When questions about military integration arose, eyes shifted to me. I answered clearly, concisely, pulling from 7 years of experience in cyber warfare, not guesswork. The proposed interface lacks redundancy protocols. I said at one point, in the event of a breach, recovery time needs to be under 90 seconds. What you're offering is too slow. Engineers scribbled notes, executives nodded. Then it was Gregory's turn. He stood nervously, launching into a presentation about the UI module. This design, he explained, simplifies the user flow for field operatives and minimizes input lag. His voice cracked once. He avoided my eyes. When he finished, I asked 2 questions. The first revealed that his model didn't account for classified clearance tiers. The second exposed a flaw in his security handshake protocol. I wasn't cruel, just clinical. This was national security, not a sibling rivalry. As I spoke, I saw my father's face darken with realization. The daughter he had dismissed, the one he believed followed a lesser path, had become the gatekeeper of the very contract that defined his career. When the meeting ended, Shannon approached me again. "Colonel," she said with a nod, "it's clear we're in good hands. I look forward to your continued involvement." "Likewise," I said. "I'll be on site tomorrow to conduct a compliance audit." My father stood nearby, silent. My brother looked like he wanted to disappear. Back in my car, I sat for a long moment, staring at the glass tower of Pinnacle through the windshield. Years ago, I'd wanted so badly for them to recognize my worth. Today, I didn't need it. I had earned my place not because of them, but in spite of them. Still, tomorrow would offer something different. The chance for honesty, for acknowledgement, for reconciliation, if they were brave enough to reach for it. Because now they had seen me not as Natalie, the daughter who didn't follow their script, but as Colonel Williams, and nothing would be the same again. That afternoon, I met with the internal security team to begin a sweep of Pinnacle's protocols. It was standard procedure, but today it felt like claiming my space in a world that had once excluded me. The officers, analysts, and even a few department heads treated me with professionalism and caution. They saw the Eagle insignia, but more than that, they listened to the authority in my tone. They didn't question why I was there. I belonged. As I walked past the tech lab, I spotted Gregory through the glass. He was hunched over a workstation, speaking with one of his engineers. I paused. He hadn't looked me in the eye since the meeting. I opened the door and stepped inside. He straightened, startled. "Colonel?" "Greg," I said, nodding once. He waved off his team, who quickly cleared out. We stood in silence for a moment. "You really are the one they've been talking about," he finally said, his voice low. "The colonel, the one who signs off on everything." "Yes," he laughed bitterly. "You've been sitting at the top of the org chart and I had no idea. We thought you were still a captain, maybe." He looked up. "Why didn't you say anything last night?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. "You've spent years telling me I'd never amount to anything in the Army, that it was a fallback for people without options. I stopped trying to correct you because I realized," I paused, "I didn't need your permission to succeed." Gregory leaned against the console, rubbing the back of his neck. "You crushed me in there. I've never seen you like that. You were in control. Everyone respected you. I let the words settle. I didn't mean half the things I said growing up, he added. I was just trying to win. I nodded. We weren't supposed to be in a competition, but I know Mom and Dad made it feel like one. His eyes met mine. Do they know? They do now. Silence stretched between us. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Are you going to tank my project?" "No," I said. "I'm going to make sure it succeeds. But it has to meet real standards, military standards. This isn't personal, it's protocol." Gregory sighed. Fair. I turned to leave, then paused. You're not incompetent, Greg, just untested. I suggest you step up, because from now on, I won't be holding back. He offered a tight smile. Neither will I. Later that evening, I returned home to find my mother waiting on the porch. She held a casserole dish in her hands like some peace offering wrapped in nostalgia. I hadn't expected her. "I heard," she said simply, "from your father, from everyone." I opened the door and let her in. Inside, she sat on the edge of the couch, the same way she always did when she wasn't sure of her welcome. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know. We didn't know." "You didn't ask," I replied, not unkindly. "You never wanted to know. My path didn't fit the story you wrote for me." She looked away, ashamed. "We just wanted the best for you." "No," I said, gently but firmly. "You wanted what you thought was best, and when I chose differently, you punished me for it." Her hands trembled. "We were wrong." I sat beside her. "I never needed your approval, Mom, but I wanted your respect." She reached out and held my hand. "You have it now." I swallowed hard, feeling emotion catch in my throat. "It's been a long time coming." She nodded. "Your father wants to talk. He's trying." I exhaled. "I'll meet him tomorrow." That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. The uniform hung neatly in the closet. I didn't need it tomorrow. I wouldn't wear it for them. They'd seen it already. Now, they needed to see me. The next day, I met my father in his office. It was strangely quiet. No assistants hovered. No phones rang. He was alone at his desk, looking tired, humbled. "Colonel," he said, standing. "Natalie," I corrected him. "Today, just Natalie." He nodded. "You were incredible yesterday." "Thank you." He hesitated. "I owe you an apology, a real one. I judged you without understanding. I dismissed you, not because you weren't capable, but because I couldn't imagine your world." "I know. And you weren't just capable," he said, voice cracking. "You surpassed anything I could have imagined." I sat across from him. "This isn't about proving you wrong. It's about finally letting you see who I've been all along." He wiped his eyes. "I see you now." I smiled, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like his daughter again. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my Washington, D.C. apartment, preparing dinner. The city lights flickered outside my window, casting a soft glow on the granite countertops and framed military awards on the shelves. Tonight wasn't about medals or meetings. Tonight was about family real connection, maybe for the first time in years. My father had arrived first, holding a framed copy of a recent article from Defense Weekly featuring me at the official Project Aegis rollout. "I had it printed for your wall," he said, his voice almost shy. "It's hanging in my office already." I took it, touched by the gesture more than I expected. He never used to care about these things. Now, he carried my career like a badge of honor. A few minutes later, my mother arrived, balancing a homemade apple pie, the kind she used to bake when I was still in high school, long before the military, before everything. "I didn't know what to bring," she said nervously, placing it on the table. "But you always loved this." Her voice cracked with emotion. I didn't need grand apologies. This was enough. Then Gregory came with Megan, holding a bottle of wine and cracking a joke about security clearance level flavor. His presence was relaxed, different. We'd had a few good talks since the meeting at Pinnacle, talks about real things, not just competition or comparison. Somewhere in that mess of history, we had found brotherhood again. And then the doorbell rang. Brigadier General Eleanor Grant stood outside in civilian attire, her posture still perfect, her smile warm. "Colonel Williams," she greeted, half playful. "Permission to enter?" "Granted," I laughed, pulling her into a hug. My family had heard of her, but this was the first time they met the woman who'd believed in me when they hadn't. As we sat around the table, the conversation flowed military life, systems design, personal stories. Eleanor spoke of things my parents had never understood before: the responsibility, the stakes, the discipline. "Your daughter," she said to my father, "built one of the most secure cyber infrastructures we've ever implemented. She's not just a soldier, she's a strategist." My father looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Not pride, not approval, something deeper: respect. After dinner, as we shared coffee and my mother's pie, my dad raised his glass. "To Natalie," he said, voice steady. "Not just for what she's accomplished, but for who she had to become to accomplish it." I clinked my glass softly against theirs, heart full. Later, as everyone said their goodbyes and I walked Eleanor to the door, she looked at me with a knowing smile. "They see you now," she said. I nodded. "Took long enough. And now?" "Now I don't need them to, but it's nice." She paused. "You know, validation is powerful, but it's even more powerful when you've already validated yourself." I closed the door and stood in the quiet. She was right. I had spent years chasing acknowledgement from the people I loved, only to find that the strength I needed had always been mine. Their respect mattered, yes, but their lack of it never defined me. I had earned my place in the world. I had built it, fought for it, and led others through it. That night, as I stood by the window overlooking the Capitol, I whispered to the reflection in the glass, "My name is Natalie Williams. I am a daughter. I am a sister. I am a soldier. And I am enough."